Hello everyone, it's Friday. My name is Courtney Reyes and I'm the Executive Director of One Iowa Action. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am here with...
Keenan Crow, Director of Policy and Advocacy at One Iowa Action. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs.
Whew, we've been busy. It has been a wild 6 weeks, so we are here to give you a legislative update. We have some pretty exciting news, and I'm going to let Keenan kind of kick it off because they have been busting it at the Capitol, y'all. So let's hear from you.
Yeah, so right out of the gate, I'm just going to not bury the lead and say every single anti-LGBTQ bill that we've been talking about, all 14 of them have
14.
14.
Okay.
All 14 have been killed off by the first legislative funnel. For those of you who don't know what the funnel is kind of an artificially imposed date that the Iowa legislature follows. There's two of them, actually. We are now in the first funnel. So for a bill to clear the first funnel, it has to get through its initial subcommittee and full committee. So if the bill started in the House, it has to be through its House full committee and subcommittee by today, actually. Technically the date is today, but they don't have committees on Fridays, and so actually the date was yesterday. And so we knew late last night that all those things had died, and we're very excited to tell you about that today. There will be a second funnel as well, and that will require getting through that second committee and full committee, and so some additional things will die off at that point, and so we'll have to monitor that. But
yesterday was very exciting.
Yeah, that is very exciting. I don't think we've ever gone into a situation in the time that I've been here where we cleared first funnel with absolutely no legislation targeting LGBTQ people specifically. So a couple caveats to that now that I have announced the really, really big news. One caveat is that the session isn't over until the gavel falls. So they can still tuck things into budget bills, which are funnel proof. That's what we saw them do last year with the transgender Medicaid surgical ban. So, we can't stop monitoring, we can't stop paying attention, and we still need your help very much to keep the pressure up and ensure that nothing else comes out of the legislature after this. But having that stuff killed off by the first funnel, one, makes our job a lot easier,
for sure,
and two, really indicates to me that the majority of the legislature doesn't have a whole lot of interest in legislating against LGBTQ Iowans, which I think is a good sign.
For sure, because they're supposed to represent all Iowans, not just a few group of people. And so that's what we've really been talking to them about, is how does this impact our community, but it's impacting our entire state when you start introducing legislation like this.
Yeah. We have let you know basically when every different one of those pieces of legislation have come out, but I wanted to take some time today and just go through everything that was released and what all is in fact dead, just so you kind of get an idea of exactly how much stuff there really was to kill off. So starting with SF 508 and HF 528, these are RFRA bills. That stands for Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It does anything but what its title suggests that it does. It really is a piece of religious exclusion legislation that lets people opt out from generally applicable laws. And there are all sorts of horrible things about RFRA. I won't go into terrible detail here because we've done that in several other videos in the past. But just know SF 508, HF 258, dead. Those two are dead.
And this is huge because last year that RFRA bill made it to full committee, it didn't even see it this year, right?
2 years, actually. So both in 2019 and 2018, it had gotten through subcommittee and full committee, and by the time the first funnel was done, was awaiting a floor vote. So the fact that we've killed it off before it even went to full committee is a big deal, especially in the current climate. So those two are dead. Next one was HF 2148. This prevented teachers from talking about controversial issues in classrooms. I'll leave it to y'all's imagination as to what they consider controversial. That one is dead. HF 2201 discouraged teachers from teaching about LGBTQ people and topics by requiring that they provide some sort of disclosure every time this came up and allowed parents to opt out. Obviously, that was not a tenable bill because, anytime you were to talk about, for instance, a mainstream presidential candidate who happened to be gay, you would then trigger all that disclosure and that opt-out requirement. And so it makes talking about history and current issues and all sorts of stuff just so difficult for administrators to do. So we did have a subcommittee about that. We went and testified at that subcommittee, but that did not make it to full committee, and so HF 2201 also dead.
I love that. If my little boys were at school and they said, "Hey, I'm going to my mom's," there's 2 of us,
right,
house this weekend, like, does that trigger that?
Maybe.
Like, what?
Depends on what the teacher says, right?
Hard.
So,
like, it's just wild that could be even proposed.
Yeah,
so
well,
I'm
and the thing
glad
that we brought up at the subcommittee in particular was that it's not just gay and trans people that have sexual orientations either.
No.
Everyone has a sexual orientation. Everyone has a gender identity. And so to put a blanket ban on talking about that stuff really started to seem like it was going to put a blanket ban on talking about a lot of history and a lot of current events, because anytime you mention that somebody's married, anytime that you mention that someone identifies as a man, like, you're going to trigger all this crazy disclosure stuff. And so it's just a mess of a bill. So glad that one's dead.
Yes.
HF 2202 allowed for discrimination against and exclusion of transgender athletes within schools. I think there's obvious reasons why that's a huge problem, but that one is dead. It didn't even get a hearing. HF 2130 dramatically expands the definition of the term bona fide religious purpose under the Iowa Civil Rights Act. There are already exclusions in the Iowa Civil Rights Act for things that are very reasonable. So, for instance, if a church is choosing who they want to lead their church, who they want to be a pastor or something like that, or a religious school is choosing their educator for religious instruction, yeah, absolutely, they probably need to be of the religion that is being discussed and follow the tenets of that religion in some way, shape, or form. And so in those cases, yes, we absolutely understand why those exemptions need to be there to protect everybody's First Amendment rights, right? But what this does is it really expands that definition to the point where, for instance, if a church was operating a polling site or operating a non-religious service like a thrift store or an adoption agency, that was giving them a lot more latitude to discriminate, and that's obviously a problem for not just LGBTQ Iowans, but a whole bunch of other people too. So.
For sure.
That one's dead.
Yes, I love that.
SF 2130 forces Iowans to disclose their sexual orientation on their marriage licenses for the purposes of denying custody of their children in the future. This was one of the more ridiculous pieces of legislation. It spawned all sorts of interesting think pieces all across the internet, so I encourage you to go check those out. Because it is just, it's outright silly. I mean, to have the government creating a registry of who has what sexual orientation, and really to only have the initial stated purpose of that to be used as a negative, as if gay people are not capable of raising children, something to that effect. Extremely offensive piece of legislation. Never had a hearing, and that one is dead. I'm going to group a couple of these together because they are not necessarily the exact same bill, but they do very, very similar things. So SF 2193, SF 2194, and HF 2273. These are all what we would consider license to discriminate bills, in that they give people the option to discriminate against LGBTQ people, and some of them are very explicit at what they wanted to discriminate against LGBTQ people in. SF 2193 in particular allowed for discrimination against LGBTQ people in employment, housing, adoption, foster care, certain forms of medical care, when obtaining marriage licenses. I mean, the list went on and on and on. Lots of specificity about how they would like to discriminate and who they would like to discriminate against. So that one was a very obvious one that was
for sure
incredibly discriminatory right out of the gate.
And seems like it's the opposite of the Iowa Civil Rights Act.
Yeah. We in fact called that the Anti-Civil Rights Act when we released our press release, because
these bills on
that's exactly
already.
what it was doing. It was a bill to categorically just remove certain protections that people already enjoy in our state and have for well over a decade. So SF 2193, SF 2194, HF 2273. Dead. All dead, which is great. HF 2274, this was kind of a weird one. It created a study committee to study whether or not transgender people deserved the rights they already had in the Iowa Civil Rights Act. And it confused a lot of people because it did so by saying, well, there's an epidemic of suicide among transgender Iowans, and we want to get that under control. And of course, that's a goal we support, right? And to see that in a bill, I think, was great. But then to see how that bill accomplished that was a little concerning, because really the only mechanism was by reviewing previous discrimination complaints and then deciding if the laws protecting those people were causing them to somehow die by suicide, which didn't quite make sense, right? You can say in your law that it has the purpose of whatever, but that doesn't necessarily make it so. Just because the beekeeping legislation says it's going to solve world hunger doesn't make it so, right? So that's kind of where that bill is. We do believe that it was discriminatory, and it is now dead. So HF 2164, that removed transgender Iowans from the Iowa Civil Rights Act entirely. We knew that one was dead within about 24 hours because it was just so outrageous. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee immediately put a quash on that. So HF 2164 is dead and has been dead for quite some time.
It is so incredible.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't cause harm to the LGBT community.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Anytime these bills are introduced, we do see elevated rates of harm to people's mental health and various other things as well. So just the introduction of and the debating of these types of issues can be very harmful to folks. And so even though we've killed all this stuff off, I don't want to in any way say that people's pain and suffering from this is invalid in some way. It's totally valid, and so and we're here if people need resources to deal with that. So. All right, so HF 2164, like I said, dead. SF 2213, this creates a Class B felony for medical providers who provide medically necessary care to transgender youth. Obviously flies in the face of best medical practices and in fact penalizes doctors for following internationally recognized standards of care procedures. So really, really uniquely horrible bill, but that one is dead. And then HF 2272, that's the same thing as SF 2213, which is the bill I just talked about, but it also provides for the protection of and promotion of conversion therapists. So it's really a pro-conversion therapy bill and an anti-appropriate treatment bill. So they are, in this bill, both lifting up a practice that every major medical organization has said is discredited and banning procedures that every major medical organization have said are medically necessary, which is totally topsy-turvy from what we need to be doing, right?
The complete opposite of what we do. Yes.
So that one, HF 2272, is dead. And that actually concludes our list of bad bills that died. A very wide-ranging and comprehensive list of ways to discriminate against LGBTQ people, but we managed to tamp down all of them, fortunately. Now, there were some... If
you've seen us, we all look a little tired. Because, like I said, it's been a pretty wild 6 weeks. So, high five, fist bump Keenan if you see them. They've been putting in some long hours at the Capitol. So, y'all, it's been an interesting 6 weeks. So tell me about the good things. Yeah,
there were some good things that actually survived the funnel, and so we will have to be working on those to make sure that they make it through that second funnel date as well. The one thing that seems slated to move in particular is HSB 693. This is a piece of legislation that would ban the gay and trans panic defenses. For those of you who don't know what a gay or trans panic defense is, this is what happens when somebody starts flirting with someone else, maybe doesn't realize that they're gay or trans, finds out, and then gets very upset that they've been flirting with a gay or trans person, and then uses that as an excuse to either assault or kill them, and get a reduced sentence or get off completely in certain instances. Obviously, somebody's sexual orientation or gender identity is no reason to kill them or to assault them in any way, shape, or form, and so we're very happy that is advancing and in fact cleared the House Judiciary Committee with a unanimous vote and a promise to expand it even further from the way that they had constructed it initially. Now, we do want those language changes very much. The current language is not quite there yet, but we have promises from legislators that they're going to help us expand it, make sure that it hits every type of violent crime that could be directed in that way against somebody. But it's good now, and we hope it only gets better. It can be improved. So that's one that is certainly going to advance. There are a few others that are kind of tangentially related. Some efforts to overhaul protocols for responding to suicide in schools, making sure that suicide hotlines are printed on student ID cards, things like that. Anytime we can try to impact kids and make sure that we save a few kids' lives, I think that is our responsibility responsibility to do as an
Absolutely.
LGBTQ organization, right? So that is something that we'll also be focusing on as well. But the trans and gay panic defenses, I think, are an incredible development in this current political climate.
And that's a direct result of having communications with people, legislators outside of session.
Yes.
And so that work, you started that work last year.
Oh, yeah.
And being able to have those conversations. So it's so incredibly important to remember that we're not just working these 5 months of the year,
No.
that this is a year-round process that we're really putting in
Yeah.
this effort to make a huge difference in Iowa.
Yeah, in fact, having long conversations with legislators is almost impossible once the session
Yes,
has started. So
sure.
any sort of long format conversation really needs to happen outside of session, and we do those, basically all year long. Whenever we can, whenever people are available to meet with us, we'll pretty much meet with them and talk to them about how they can make life better for LGBTQ Iowans.
I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. What else do we have?
That's pretty much it in terms of legislation. There are a few things that we're monitoring or that we're registered against that maybe don't necessarily target LGBTQ Iowans, but would have a disproportionate impact on them. And so, like I said, far from done. The work is not over by any means. But in terms of the stuff that directly targeted or had an impetus in trying to target LGBTQ Iowans, that stuff is all gone, which is a major accomplishment. So the one thing I did want to bring up, though, is that this stuff is unfortunately not free to do, right?
Yes, absolutely. I just think about how many hours
Yeah.
go into this, and it's not just our physical time, it's our communications team. I believe one night we got a message at 9:45 at night, and we had to put out a press release, and I wanted to thank the viewers and the people who are watching that because we had over 800 responses.
Yeah, a ton of shares, and I think we reached like 90,000 people on I think we got it out at like 11 p.m. an 11 p.m. press release.
Right. So this work doesn't stop at 5 p.m. We need y'all to stay engaged, and we know you get tired, and we know that you all get tired of hearing us, and we're not crying wolf when we post things. Please know that we want you to take action, and that we're doing our best to give you the best information you can possibly have.
Yes.
But that takes a lot of work. So I'm also here to ask, can you support our organization? Can you support One Iowa Action? I love when people can do a reoccurring donation. Those small $5, $10 a month, that really helps power the work that we can do.
Right.
Because we know that the session may be over in April or May, but we have a lot of work to keep doing for November.
Then we have electoral work to kick off. So, but every penny that you donate to One Iowa Action goes toward improving the state legislature in some way, whether it's through electoral work or lobbying or whatever else. All of that money goes directly to our advocacy efforts. So if you want to have a major impact, donating to One Iowa Action is a great way to do that, because like you said, it's not just staff hours, right? It's also keeping the lights on. It's being able to have a laptop at the Capitol so that you can respond really quickly, to have a VPN on that laptop so that your information is secure, to have a phone that's always available and ready to go. All of these things, printed materials, you name it, that takes money. And so we are asking for your support so that we can keep doing this work as effectively as possible and have another big win like this every single year.
Yeah, because the hope is at some point we're going to be having 14 positive things go through instead of 14 negative things coming at us.
Yes.
So we know that work is being laid every single day with the work that we're doing. Another way for y'all to stay involved is if you don't have our action alerts, be sure to go to One Iowa Action's website and sign up for action alerts. That's where you can know how to take action immediately.
Yes.
And we send those out when you need things to happen.
Yep.
So we try not to flood your inbox. There's this 3 words that have been keeping me going through this, and it's votes, volunteers, and money. And that's what we're doing. We need votes. We need people to be active and aware. We need people to volunteer, and we'll make those specific calls to you. We have some big plans for what the rest of the year looks like, so be looking for that information from us, and then we need money to power what we do every single day.
Time, talent, and treasure, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So one final way that you can help make an impact outside of all of that stuff is by showing up at LGBTQ Day at the Capitol on March 23rd. Sign-ups for that are now available, so either go to Facebook or our website and check out how you can sign up for that. That'll be basically a full day at the Capitol with the training and everything else, so that you're all ready to go to talk to your legislator and to tell them what kinds of issues matter to you, either as an ally or as an LGBTQ Iowan.
For sure. It's a great day to get over that fear of how do I talk to these folks. They're just humans like the rest of us, and Keenan always gives some good pro tips of how to make that feel a little less scary. So March 23rd,
Yep.
It's going to be at the State Historical Society, and then we'll head up to the Capitol. Please join us that day.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. A day of really great news, but we need you to stay engaged, stay watchful with us. We will certainly still be up at the Capitol monitoring and watching this stuff, but we're so grateful to have your support. So thank you, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, y'all.